Hello and welcome to the 7th episode of the Invincible Brand Podcast. If you follow my work, then you probably have heard me talk about a grievance that I have recently. And that grievance revolves around the fact that the current allure, it's an attractive allure, it's a thrilling allure of crisis management as a profession. So with things like Scandal, the TV show, and, viral crises and issues that are constantly in the news, and just there's so much hype around crisis management these days. Combine this with the lack of required certification for the profession or within the profession. And my grievance lies around the risk that this is presenting to organizations. I'm seeing it more and more, and it's a constant frustration for me because organizations deserve better, and crisis management advisors are supposed to help mitigate the risk, not increase the risk for the organization. I recently put out a video that discusses this, that discusses my grievance, that discusses the 3 common risks that I see more and more as a result of this reality. And I presented some thoughts on how we can help change this, how we can work together to change this and mitigate this risk for organizations. And this video ended up sparking a lot of conversation around this topic, which was really enlightening to me and really just what I didn't necessarily expect, but was so happy and grateful to receive. And one of these conversations that I had was with a colleague of mine whose name is Charlie Maclean-Bristol. And the more Charlie and I talked about it, the more I said, okay, we need to pause this conversation and record it so that others can listen to it and hopefully benefit from it. And that is what this week's episode of the Invincible Brand Podcast is. It is this conversation between myself and Charlie. And I always want to hear from you. So if you want to add to this conversation, please feel free to email me, to, message me on social, and we can continue the conversation. I also want to make a little bit of a sidebar comment that Charlie was in a very low reception area, so sometimes his Wi-Fi cut in and out. He did his best to mitigate this, and he was sitting in his car getting the best signal that he possibly could, which I thought was lovely and appreciated. And so please bear with the little technology glitches that come in and out every once in a while in the conversation. It does not detract from the conversation, in my opinion, which is why it is still being published and shared with you. And I hope that you are able to see past that and really tune into the importance of what Charlie and I talk about. With that said, I will stop talking in this form and lead into the conversation. So without further ado, welcome to this week's episode of the Invincible Brand Podcast. Charlie, welcome to the show. Why don't you tell everybody about who you are and what you're all about?
All right, so I'm Charlie Maclean-Bristol from Plan B Consulting. I run a smallish consultancy from Glasgow, mainly on the business continuity and crisis management front. And we also do a bit of cyber incident management. Built it up over 10 years from one consultant, me, till about 11 consultants. At the moment, we do the consultancy pretty much sort of worldwide, mainly in UK, but got to go covering about sort of 10, 12 countries worldwide.
Awesome. And for listeners can't see you, but viewers can, and we have to mention why you're in a car, because otherwise I think people will just wonder.
Yeah, this is my plan. This is my plan B. Is I have a holiday house on an island which doesn't have very good internet connection. So I went to the best internet connection I found, and that was rubbish. So I am actually sitting looking at the 4G mast with my best chance of getting some connection there. So that's a little bit of crisis management in action here.
Issue management and dedication. So I appreciate that. We're here nonetheless.
Yeah.
So you and I have been connected for some time via email, really, for a few years, I think. I mean, it's been a long time. And recently I put out a video that talks about my frustration with the sexy allure of what we do for a living, of crisis management and crisis communication, and how shows like Scandal have helped to, augment that appeal that what our profession is seeming to draw to people from people. And not just Scandal, but, viral issues. They look like they're fun. They look like they're exciting. It looks like we have an exciting career, which I'm not saying that we don't, but it certainly looks that way from the outside world. And as a result, what I'm seeing more and more personally, and then I definitely want to hear how you are seeing this, but I'm seeing one of three things occur or come to me often, which is a very big frustration of mine. That one of them is clients are coming saying, or new clients, or organizations that are new to me are coming and saying, we were given poor advice while managing an issue or a crisis, and now we are suffering the consequences of that. And those consequences can be quite impactful and quite dire. The second one is they'll come and they'll say, so we hired this firm or this consultant to build out our crisis ready program. And then they'll start talking to me about it. And I am sitting there kind of flabbergasted going in my head, this is not practical. This isn't going to work. This is missing a whole bunch of very essential pieces that the client doesn't know because that's not their area of expertise. But you and I would know because it is. And then the third one is organizations coming to me and hindering their own crisis readiness and their own the path towards their crisis readiness because they've had just such a poor experience with other consultants and advisors and organizations or firms in the past that they're apprehensive, and rightfully so, but a disservice to them as a result. So those are my three grievances, and they're my three grievances because it's one thing to think that what we do is exciting and all of that. It's another thing to not realize the risk involved with what we do and the importance that of the services that we serve our clients in their most trying of times with the deepest type of impacts, both on people, on business, on reputation, all of the above. So I just kind of want to preface with that, but you and I started chatting about it and thought, what a great conversation to kind of just talk through, because to your point, there is no certification yet. I'm working on it, but there is no certification for becoming crisis management advisor. And I will stop talking now. And I'd love to hear, just kind of open up the discussion with you and hear your perspective and your experience with it.
I kind of describe what you're saying is slightly what I call builders Carpenters Syndrome. Is that the fact is that when the building industry is booming, there are only so many skilled people to go around. So lots of people call themselves carpenters and they get employed as carpenters and they begin plain pieces of wood. And it's fairly obvious after a little while that they don't really know much about carpentry. And sometimes the client or the house builder, or whatever, needs to keep them in there because they just need bodies. Sometimes they, sack them and say, you don't actually know what you're doing. And I think a little bit the crisis management industry is like this. Perhaps it's booming at the moment because there's lots of good reasons to have crisis management. And I think it then sucks in people who, I could try my hand at this. It doesn't look too complicated. So I think that's maybe where we're at. The business continuity industry was perhaps booming about 10 years ago, and it sucked in an awful lot of people who are now not there because the fact is that, they found out they weren't as good as they thought they were. There wasn't enough business. The clients caught them out, and they're no longer there. So I think it's difficult, this one. And I think it's difficult to try and prove, a lot of consultancy is about chemistry between you and your client. And so if they like you and they think you know what you're talking about, then, you can kind of quite go a long way, even not knowing very much. And that's a sort of difficult one, because I kind of claim to kind of know what I'm doing, but I've been not thrown off jobs, but it came to a fairly abrupt halt, and that's because my chemistry with this particular organization just didn't work. Maybe I wasn't listening, maybe I wasn't doing what I was meant to do, but I've never had before. But sometimes it's about chemistry, and I think it's a difficult one for clients. And one of it, almost, I think, for clients is you need to be an informed buyer. If you go out and actually know what the buzzwords are, know a little bit about the subject, go on a crisis management course yourself, and then when your consultants can come in, you can quiz them and say, look, you can mention theories, or you can mention key people, or you can mention qualifications, and they can see whether they actually talk about or know what you're talking about, or whether actually they start to stall and bluff the way, and then you can start doing it. So I think, it's a little bit difficult in terms of the client, but I think one of the steps, and there were some things to come out of this, is for your clients to be an informed client, so that they can actually go out and understand what they're buying. I think that's one of the first steps.
I agree. I think that it's challenging because there aren't many courses, and not just that, but I think that people listening who work for an organization, who might own the crisis readiness of that organization and are tasked with hiring an advisor, an outside consultant to come help them prepare it, design it, are probably thinking, but I'm busy and I can't. It's the whole purpose that I'm hiring somebody,
yes.
Right? So I do think it's kind of a hybrid. I think that it's our responsibility, yours and mine, and people like us, professionals like us, to help educate the market, to provide them with resources and information in digestible chunks that are manageable and practical, in a way that they can then take that and feel a little bit more informed and actually be a little bit more informed. And then I know that I'm hit with so for example, I'm doing a webinar series. I have a webinar series, and half of the people who attend this series are consultants or work for firms that do what we do, and the other half are organizations. And one of the biggest questions that I keep getting asked by the consultants is, how do I educate my market? I'm in Spain and nobody understands the necessity for this, or there's a huge gap. And and I know this because when I started, that was exactly my position. Nobody thought that they needed it. And then, So I think that it's this constant struggle, but I do believe that it's our responsibility to help inform the market, to help them become more informed buyers in very practical and tactical ways.
Yeah, I think just thinking about that, I really think the clever consultants are people like yourselves who put out a lot of stuff out there and share what they know. I think the non-clever consultants are the one who say, oh, my IP is all myself and I'll keep it to myself and not tell anyone. Because the problem is that if no one knows you got good IP, then no one knows you've got it. So if your website's bereft of blogs and information and stuff, you might be absolutely brilliant, or you might be absolutely useless because you haven't got any of the stuff. So I think the thing is also, I'm not sure so much about the United States market, but I think there is a sort of triangle of three things that you could look at for consultants. The first thing is your length and breadth of experience. Now, I think that can be important. You can still do the same thing badly for 10 years. So not necessarily having you done it for years and years and years is not necessarily. And I say we've got a couple of consultants in our organization who are about, a couple under 35, and they, I think, are as good as most people in the industry. So I don't think age really matters that. But you want to get people experience, and if you can have some big name companies, that always looks good. So I think there's experience. There's also the professional qualifications. Now, I'm a fellow of the Business Continuity Institute, and that's actually quite hard. It's harder than I thought to get there. Fellow of the Emergency Planning Society. I've done the ACES CPP qualification. So I think you can get professional qualifications from organizations. There's less on the crisis management side. There's, in the UK, is the Institute PR, which I'm sure has a fellow as well. So I think as a buyer, you're looking out for those qualifications. And if I've heard people, I don't do qualifications, I don't need qualifications to prove my worth. And you kind of think, well, this is your profession. Do you take it seriously? All right, just because you're a fellow or something doesn't make you brilliant, but it still means you take your profession seriously and you've gone down the effort to do it. I think there's also the academic path as well, where you can do undergraduate degrees, you can do your MSc. There's quite a lot of MScs around in the UK, disaster management, crisis management. There's lots of them around risk management, and then there's sort of PhDs as well. So I think you ought to have gone some way down some of those roads to do it. And I think, sorry, go ahead.
No, continue.
And I think there's the last one is, and this is a danger, I think, if you get intellectually lazy, and I think you're looking for your consultant to be saying, well, what have you been reading? What's the latest things? What are people talking about? Because these things change in fashions and they change. And I think you want your consultants to be learning, reading. I got a Timothy Coombe book, who's the sort of crisis communications guy, a sort of academic. And I got some case books, and I got his sort of book, which I've been sort of threatening to buy because it's about £70. And I was really excited to get these books. And I actually hid away for a couple of hours just to read them. So, I think you need to be intellectually curious. And I think we have to make sure that we don't get lazy and suddenly say, oh, yeah, doing the same thing for the last 10 years, punting it out and not really ever changing or thinking about it. And I find myself going around in circles where I'll go get some new ideas, and then I'll go back to something I did 10 years ago and say, oh, that was rather good. I quite like that. Yeah, I've forgotten I'd done that. And you go around a little bit in circles, but I think you've always got to be constantly inventing, reading, looking at other people's ideas, intellectually curious as well.
I agree 100%, especially in this day and age when expectations of stakeholders continue to rise, new challenges with technology, and just, our trends change so quickly, and those trends have an impact. And they have an impact in so many senses, but even just, I had a client that before they hired me, they had an incident where they thought that they had an active shooter on their site, and they were tweeting, and they didn't realize, and they hired me afterwards because they realized that they shouldn't have been tweeting, that tweeting was a secondary means of communication, in that sense, because the primary means of communication was to get people that were on the grounds to safety, right? And those people were not on Twitter. But there was this misconception of crisis communication is social media. So understanding just the different dynamics and not, so I agree 100%. The thing with schools or academia is, and this is a frustrating thing that I see from my professor friends. I do a lot of work with students and professors regularly. And actually, when I wrote my book, it was part of the market for this book or part of the intention and the strategy behind the book was to have it adopted into course curriculum, because these professors kept coming to me and saying everything on the subject is theoretical and is more ancient than current. and it's not serving our students. So students were going in, and yet I get reached out to at least 5 times a week on average by students every single week, because again, the sexy allure of crisis management, they all want to do it. And yet in the schools, and they're doing their undergraduates, or they're doing their not necessarily their PhDs, but their MBAs, and they're not receiving the right kind of education, practical education that actually serves then to go into whether doing it for an organization or doing it as a firm, right? As a firm and having clients and doing it day in and day out. But again, I think that's, I'm going to say our responsibility. I'll say myself. I take that on as part of my responsibility, that if I have the capacity and the capability to help change that, then that's my responsibility to make way to help do that. And I just think that it requires more of us who do our jobs really, really well and who have a passion and an affinity for what we do. And we do it for all the right reasons to serve the organizations that we serve. I think that we have to just we have to be more verbal and vocal about it, and proactive about fixing what we see as needing fixed. And what I thought was interesting was that video that I put out. I mean, I contemplated that video for about 2 months, just getting calls after calls after calls of organizations and continuously seeing this and feeling this frustration for these 3, different occurrences that I keep seeing. And I didn't know, I needed to contemplate how to address it in a way that served, that provided solution, but also addressed the problem as a risk, because that's how I see it. And it took me 2 months. It's a video that's twice the length of my average videos, or even more. It's 10 minutes long. My average video is about 4 minutes. And the response that I got was wonderful from people like you, and other people like us that came and said, this is exactly, we're seeing this too. So I think that it is our responsibility to address it and to provide, to your point, help buyers become informed, and also challenge the status quo that currently exists that just isn't cutting it anymore, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think there's one other thing. Let's address the academia piece first. I'm actually doing a module on an MSc course. I'm training that for one of the Glasgow universities, and I'm training a whole load of guys from South Africa, a transport company in South Africa. And I totally take your bit, is that academia is very divorced from practicality.
Yeah.
And, I'm reading some of these papers and things, and time to do it. But one of the sort of the big gurus in crisis management, I came across lots of papers by Dennis Fishbacker Smith. Now, I kind of claim to be reasonably well educated, never heard of him, but he's one of the big gurus in crisis management, or academic crisis management. And I find that really frustrating, that bridge, but academics don't seem to be very good at bridging this stuff. And then what we've got to do is I try and read a reasonable amount of papers and stuff, and then have to kind of interpret it for normal human beings, because if you go and give a senior executive a whole load of theories, they're going to, you'll be out the door pretty quick. You've got to take the academic theory, boil it down to its baseline, and then say, right, if you're doing decision making, this is how to avoid groupthink. And people can understand that. But if you did all the theories round about it, they'll just kind of not do it. So I think so there's some really good stuff out there, but it's almost like you need to be translated into kind of human speak. But then my point about my students I have is that if you're writing academically, we in the end, I always call them, maybe you wouldn't call yourself, but I call ourselves opinionated amateurs. We're not academics.
Oh yeah, I'm not an academic.
Yeah, we go out, we read stuff, we put it together, we put it in front of people, and they say, yeah, that sounds good, or that makes sense to me. And we think that makes sense to us. I can go out and teach someone it. I can write it into a book. I can do things with it, write it into a presentation, because I understand it, and it makes good common sense. But when I'm marking this MSc module, you can't just do that. You have to put all the quotes back to the papers. And it's a real kind of difficult balance, because they're doing it. It's not all crisis management. This is a kind of a general operations MSc. So they're doing crisis management. It's one of the modules. And I'm trying to say there has to be a balance between academia and something practical they can use. I want them something to take away where they can either go and instruct their staff to write a crisis management plan, or at least know what's in it, so that they can do a bit like you can be an informed reader. So I think that's difficult. That one is trying to sort of call out the crisis management. There's also another thing that I think is that we ought to throw into the bit, and I call it the PwC test. And I say there are other big four people, so it's not just PwC. But always I'm a great believer that if you're doing crisis management, you can put it the way you like, but if a PwC auditor comes in and audits you, they have to go and say that you're not you've done the essentials. You're not so kind of wacky your ideas that they wouldn't pass an audit test. Because I think that's where the danger is, a bit like you've said with some of your clients, is they come and say, what is it you have in this thing? You know, you're going to get minuses and all this audit, because all the things I would expect to be in there are not in there. And I think business continuity is maybe a little bit more easier than crisis management, because there is an ISO standard for business continuity.
Yeah, it's been around longer.
Sorry?
It's been around longer, and it's more tangible.
It is a lot more tangible, and crisis management is a little bit more of an art. Mm-hmm. So your plan just might be brilliant on the day at advising clients. So, but I think there needs to be a baseline, and I think crisis management. There's the BS 11300. Have you seen that standard?
Nope.
There's a crisis management. I'll send you the link to it afterwards. There is a crisis management. It's not quite an ISO standard yet, but there's a crisis management document there, which is you can't certify to it, but that'd be a sort of document. At least you can actually make sure that you've covered off all the bits in that. We all have different styles of how we like to do it, but I think you have to make sure that there is a general standard, and you would pass that kind of audit test of, this is, you've covered all the basics and it's all done. Yeah. Do you sort of write a particular standard, or what sort of?
For me, for academia?
Do you deliver consultancy with a particular standard or particular meter criteria in mind, or do you have your sort of methodology that you kind of?
I have my methodology that I've developed over time. My approach is more is very in depth, and it's more in depth than anything I've ever seen by anybody else who does what I do or attempts to. And that's a big reason as to, even just the book, the book gives it all, but then this webinar series, which I will be turning into as a crisis ready certification course, online course, but that's kind of the point. And it'll be targeted to kind of three buckets of the market, which is academia. So, professors, already the book is being adopted into academia. So this can help professors go a step further with their classes. Organizations that are tasked with it that don't have the resources or the buy-in to bring in somebody like me or you. And then consultants to help them better understand, just have a deeper, more effective and valuable process that better serves. Because crisis management, I will never use the term crisis management plan. I never use that language. And that's even just that. I use the term crisis ready program. Program is cultural. It's adopted into the culture of the organization. And today, in my opinion, this is the requirement, the baseline requirement, if you're going to be crisis ready. And it's not about having a plan that sits on a shelf anymore. Plans are very siloed and very linear, and they're not practical or effective the way that they need to be. They're great exercises. You need to plan in order to become crisis ready, but solely relying on that plan does a disservice and puts you at a disadvantage. And even just that mindset needs to, and that's simple, right? But then it's about how do you do that? And then that's the whole course and the book and all of that is really helping other people better do this. So it's my methodology that I've developed over time, that's different and that I believe should be used more widely.
I think the other thing that we try and do as good consultants is to know our limitations, to know we've occasionally, because consultants are kind of, especially at the beginning, you're kind of say, yeah, I can do that. What do you want?
Oh, you cut out.
Work. And I think one of the things we've learned is only once or twice come a cropper on things that are on the edge of our experience and the edge of our knowledge. And I think a good consultant knows when to walk away. One of the things we won't do, which I think you do, is we don't give advice on the day. So if there is a crisis for our clients, we'll give them advice they want to, but we don't kind of go in there and sit with the crisis team and support them, because I don't really feel for myself that's my sort of core knowledge, and I much prefer the planning and doing that. And I know I'm not brilliant at doing the more kind of under pressure, dealing with the incident, and
But even that's really, really great and really strong. And I agree with you 100%. So, and that's one of the things that I said in that video was, if exactly that, own your strengths, know your strengths before you can own your strengths, and then either partner with, I use this as an example. I'm a certified media trainer. I choose not to media train my clients. I have wonderful, brilliant professionals that if I recommend to my clients that they need high stakes media training, I bring them in because they do it day in and day out, and they are far stronger than I am at it, because that's not what I do day in and day out, even though I'm technically certified and I could do it. We have to own our strengths, and we have to, I believe it's our responsibility, and it's the only way to serve. And there is nothing wrong. I think that a part of the misconception just in business in general is people want to do it all. And I've built my business personally, my career, off of being extremely niche focused and excelling at what I do, and then having the right collaborations and the right partnerships with people who are as good as me in their area of expertise, and coming together when those times call for it. And that is in service to the client rather than saying, I'm your one-stop shop. And I think that that's another really, really strong point for both the informed buyer as well as for consultants out there who have this misinterpretation or construed perception that they need to be all of the above for everything.
Yeah. No, I think that's important is to know your limitations, and once or twice in the past got caught out, and then you kind of just live and learn and say, look, don't really do that. So I think that's important. But I think I want to come back to that sort of point of this. I put out a little bit of a survey of who they thought were the crisis gurus in UK. If I was going to the States, I can name people like yourself, like Jim Lewowski, the Barton, the Finks, and those sort of pieces, the Bernsteins. So they're kind of fairly good at making themselves names, whereas there's not really very many in the UK. And I think it is because I think sometimes in the UK, we're a bit inclined to keep everything to ourselves and don't tell anyone anything, just in case we let loose our IP. And I think that's a mistake. I think you give your stuff away, you get people in. I'm just amazed the amount of stuff that you've done and pushed out there. And some people say, "Oh, that's all IP. You've given this all away." But actually, the more you give away, the more people say, "Well, this person's definitely an expert." So this
and
is
it remains to be my IP. I don't lose my IP. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's and I think it is. It's a different way of thinking about it, and you've got to. You've got a little bit of this is the have to sell yourself. If you're very timid and you don't get out there, well, no one know you exist. So
you
know,
can't
you
be
have
the best kept secret in business. That does not serve you.
No, you got to sell yourself. And it's very funny that you look on people who sell themselves quite well, and then they'll suddenly disappear. And I think you've kind of done this before, is they disappear because they've sold themselves too well. They don't have time to do all the social media stuff. Then they come back on with a wallop because they, you know, all the work's come to it. Not all the work comes to an end, and then they have time to do it. And I think, I think some people's busyness is in inverse proportion to the amount of social media.
That's funny, and absolutely, when you're busy, you're busy.
Yeah, and you have less time to do the nice to have things.
That's a disservice to your business too, because that's when you need to be doing it. It's constant. Yes. And I fall prey to that all the time, just because I'm basically just me. I mean, I have a team, but my team should be bigger. I'm working on that. But yeah, so Charlie, I want to be respectful of your time. Thank you so much for this conversation. I think that this has been stimulating, and it's an important, necessary conversation to have. So thank you for having it with me. Where can people find and follow you?
Yeah, so Plan B Consulting, so it's planbconsulting.com, and it's just go onto my website and all my details are on there. I also write a weekly blog through businesscontinuitytraining.com, and so you can get the weekly blog if you'd like there. But thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thanks.
Apologies for the car.
Oh, no, the car is fun. Crisis management conversation in a car. Thank you so much. And links will be to the things that you send to your different platforms below this video or podcast, wherever you're watching or listening to it from. Charlie, thank you so much. It was a pleasure chatting with you.